Quit faking it, my dad snapped as I struggled to breathe. My aunt scoffed, saying I was just trying to get out of cleaning up. But when the EMT checked my pulse, he shouted for a stretcher. The whole room erupted in panic. Quit faking it. Those words, from my own father, still echo in my soul. I was gasping for air, vision blurring, collapsing on his kitchen floor, and he genuinely believed I was just trying to get out of cleanup duty. That 4th of July, his disbelief nearly cost me my life. My whole life, it felt like a relentless battle to be believed. Growing up as Abigail Marshall, 25 years old now, meant one thing above all: weakness was unacceptable. My father, Frank Marshall, ran our home like a construction site. Rigid expectations, zero excuses. He was a towering man, 6 feet of calloused hands, and a voice that could carry across any job site. Complaining to Dad? You'd get a lecture about real problems. From my earliest memories, any whisper of pain or sickness was met with a wall of skepticism, never sympathy. I was 7 when I fell from the backyard oak tree and broke my wrist. Before he'd even consider urgent care, Dad made me wash the dishes, convinced I was exaggerating. The doctor later said I was lucky there wasn't permanent damage from the delay. This pattern was a constant drumbeat throughout my childhood. My pain didn't matter, my experiences were invalid. My mother died when I was 4, leaving Dad to raise my younger sister, Jessica, and me. Maybe that explained his harshness, but it never excused it. Mom had been our shield, a buffer between his stern pragmatism and our vulnerable childhoods. Without her, we were exposed. Then there was Aunt Martha, Dad's sister, perfectly coiffed, armed with critical comments disguised as concern. "Are you sure you should eat that, Abigail?" Or, "That outfit is certainly a choice." She appointed herself my feminine role model, but her guidance was just thinly veiled criticism. The only person who ever truly saw me was Jessica. 3 years my junior, she somehow escaped the dramatic label plastered on me. When migraines left me vomiting in the bathroom, Jessica would silently bring me water, sitting with me in the dark. When Dad accused me of faking to skip school, she'd defend me in her quiet way, though it rarely changed anything. By 16, I had internalized their dismissal so deeply I began to doubt myself. Maybe I was dramatic. Maybe normal people didn't feel pain like this. I stopped mentioning when I felt unwell, pushing through fevers and injuries. All it did was reinforce their existing beliefs. Getting into State University, 300 miles away, felt like a prison break. For 4 years, I built a life where people took me at my word. My roommate, Elaine, never questioned my migraines. Professors granted extensions when I was genuinely sick. For the first time, I experienced validation. I was believed. After graduation, I found a marketing job in the city, vowing never to return home. I called on holidays, visited twice a year with meticulously planned exit strategies, crafting a life far from the family that had made me doubt my own reality. Then, the economic downturn hit. Our firm lost 3 major clients, and as one of the newest hires, I was among the first let go. Student loans and city rent quickly devoured my savings. After 3 agonizing months of unsuccessful job hunting, I faced the unthinkable, moving back. Dad offered the apartment above the garage rent-free. Jessica, now a nurse, seemed genuinely thrilled. Even Aunt Martha mentioned connections at her country club. Swallowing my pride, I packed up my life and drove back to the place I had been so desperate to escape. The 4th of July was a Marshall family tradition: barbecue, fireworks, the whole clan. With me back home, Dad made it clear I was to take over the hosting duties Mom once handled. "You live here now," he'd snapped when I suggested Aunt Martha, who'd handled it for years. "Time to pull your weight." So, the week before, I cleaned, planned, shopped, all while my increasingly desperate job search continued. The pressure to create a perfect gathering was immense. Any flaw would be blamed on my supposed incompetence. I had no idea this party would become a turning point, not just for my family's perception, but for my very survival. 3 days before the 4th, the first sign emerged. I woke up unusually tired, despite 9 hours of sleep. My body felt heavy, like I was moving underwater. Climbing stairs left me winded. You're out of shape, I told myself, echoing Dad's words. I ignored it, pushing through my monumental to-do list. That afternoon, vacuuming the living room, I stopped twice to catch my breath. A dull ache settled in my right calf, but I dismissed it as a muscle strain. Years of conditioning had taught me to ignore my body, to push through discomfort, to avoid being dramatic. That evening, I called Elaine. You sound terrible, she said after I coughed through my job search update. Just tired from cleaning, I laughed, trying to ignore the strange tightness in my chest. Dad wants this party perfect. Elaine, ever direct, reminded me, your dad could hire cleaners. He just wants to keep you busy, make you feel indebted. Maybe, I admitted. Just be careful, Abby, she softened. You know how you get when you're back there, ignoring what your body is telling you. I promised to rest, then stayed up until midnight prepping food. The next morning, the fatigue was worse. I took a shower and had to sit down halfway through, lightheaded. Looking back, these were screaming warning signs. But years of doubt had taught me to assume I was overreacting. By July 3rd, the leg pain had intensified, joined by a sharp chest pain with deep breaths. I bandaged my calf, took pain relievers, and kept going. The whisper of "something's wrong" was drowned out by the louder voice, the one that sounded remarkably like my father, calling me dramatic. The morning of the 4th, I felt utterly off. My breathing was shallow, like my lungs couldn't quite fill. Getting dressed left me dizzy. Still, the party loomed. Guests would arrive in hours. I pushed through, setting up tables, hanging decorations. Each task was a monumental effort, but I blamed stress and lack of sleep. By noon, I was moving in slow motion, but the backyard looked festive. Jessica arrived early, taking one look at me and frowning. You look terrible, Abby. Are you okay? Just tired, I said, the ingrained response automatic. Can you help me with the coolers? As we lugged them, a sharp pain shot through my chest. I nearly dropped my end. Jessica noticed. Seriously, what's wrong? She pressed. Nothing. Pulled a muscle, probably. I forced a smile, ignoring my racing heart. A memory flashed. 8th grade science test. I'd woken up with a fever, begged to stay home. Dad had accused me of avoiding the test. He forced me to school, where I threw up mid-exam. Even then, with undeniable proof of illness, I'd been scolded for making a scene. That day had etched a powerful lesson into me. Expressing pain was futile. By 2, guests began arriving. Each arrival meant a brighter smile, ignoring the tightening chest, the strange tingling in my fingers. Aunt Martha arrived last, as usual, sweeping her critical gaze over the decorations. Well, you certainly went with a theme, didn't you? She sniffed. Then she turned to me. Good heavens, Abigail, you look terrible. Are you trying to get attention again? Nice to see you, too, Aunt Martha, I said, taking her casserole with hands. That felt oddly numb. Everyone's in the backyard. You should put some color on your face, she advised, patting my cheek. No one wants to look at someone who appears half dead at a party. The brutal irony of her words wouldn't hit me until much later. By the time we sat down to eat, maintaining the facade was a monumental struggle. Breathing became a conscious act, each inhale incomplete, like my lungs were filling with cotton. I picked at my food, unable to eat. Dad, of course, noticed. After all the money I spent, you could at least eat it, he muttered. I nodded, forcing a mouthful, swallowing an enormous effort. Across the table, Jessica watched me with concerned eyes, but said nothing. She knew, as I did, that challenging Dad in front of family only made things worse. As plates were cleared and dessert served, the pressure in my chest intensified. A sharp, stabbing pain radiated through my right side. I gasped audibly. A few heads turned, but quickly returned to conversations when I forced a smile. Bathroom, I murmured, rising unsteadily. In the downstairs bathroom, I gripped the sink, staring at my reflection. The face staring back was terrifying. My lips had a bluish tinge. My skin was pale, clammy. My eyes wide with a fear I could no longer suppress. Something was very wrong. This wasn't stress or anxiety or overreacting. I splashed cold water on my face, trying to steady my racing heart. The chest pain came in waves, each more intense. Breathing grew increasingly labored. Get it together, I whispered to my reflection, repeating Dad's mantra. Stop being dramatic. But my body was beyond responding to those ingrained commands. This wasn't something I could push through with willpower. I stayed in the bathroom for several minutes, trying to compose myself. Returning to the backyard, the effort of those few steps left me dizzy and gasping. Dad caught my arm as I nearly stumbled back into my chair. You okay? He asked, more annoyed than concerned. Fine, I managed, the lie automatic. As dessert concluded, Dad clapped his hands. All right, everyone, Jessica and Abigail will handle cleanup. The rest of us to the front for fireworks. Jessica started gathering plates, shooting me concerned glances. I remained seated, trying to summon the energy to stand. The family dispersed, leaving us alone with the aftermath. I'll handle this, Jessica said quietly. You look like you're about to pass out. No, I insisted, forcing myself up. Dad will notice. In the kitchen, I began loading the dishwasher. Bending down sent waves of dizziness through me. The kitchen lights flickered between too bright and too dim, my vision strangely tunneling. The stack of plates in my hands suddenly felt impossibly heavy. I tried to set them down, but my arms wouldn't cooperate. The crash of breaking dishes echoed as they shattered on the tile. The noise brought my father storming back, his face dark with anger. What the hell, Abigail? Those were your mother's plates. I tried to explain, but my lungs seized. I couldn't draw enough air to form words. My hand went to my chest, pressing against the vice-like pain. I can't breathe, I finally gasped, barely audible. Dad rolled his eyes, interpreting my distress as an emotional reaction to breaking dishes. Quit faking it, he snapped. Clean up this mess and get back to work. Aunt Martha appeared behind him, surveying the damage. Really, Abigail, we all know you've always tried to get out of cleanup duty, but this is ridiculous. The edges of my vision began to darken. I reached for the counter to steady myself, knocking over a glass that joined the shattered plates. She's not faking it, Jessica shouted, her voice rising in alarm as she moved to my side. Look at her. Something is really wrong. She's always been like this, Dad dismissed, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. Always making a scene. Uncle Robert stepped in, drawn by the commotion. His expression shifted from curiosity to alarm as he saw me leaning heavily against the counter, breathing rapid and shallow. Maybe we should call someone, he suggested, moving toward me. She's fine, Dad insisted, but his voice held less conviction. She just needs to calm down. I can't breathe, I repeated, the words coming between desperate gasps. The room was spinning now, faces blurring as my oxygen-starved brain struggled. My legs gave out. I slid down against the cabinets, landing amidst the broken dishes. The pain in my chest was overwhelming. Arguments erupted above me, voices rising and falling, distant, as if from another room. Enough, Jessica shouted, a sound so unexpected from my usually quiet sister that it silenced everyone. I'm calling 911. Look at her lips. They're blue. Don't you dare. Dad warned, but Jessica was already pulling out her phone, backing away when he moved to stop her. If you're wrong, you'll never hear the end of this, Aunt Martha said, but there was fear in her voice now. I was beyond caring about their reactions. My entire focus narrowed to the desperate struggle for air. Each breath was a battle I was losing. The kitchen's ceiling tilted. I slumped further, unable to hold myself upright. Through the gathering darkness, I heard Jessica's voice, steady and clear. My sister can't breathe. Yes, she's conscious, but barely. No previous heart or lung conditions that we know of. A new voice cut through the chaos. My grandmother, who had entered unnoticed. Give her space, she commanded, and surprisingly, everyone listened. She knelt beside me, her arthritic knees protesting, and took my hand. Help is coming, child, she said, the only one who seemed to fully grasp the severity of the situation. Time became fluid. I had no idea how long I lay there before sirens pierced the air. Heavy footsteps, unfamiliar voices. New faces appeared in my limited vision, EMTs in uniform. Quick, professional questions directed at Jessica. A young male EMT knelt beside me, his face serious as he took my wrist, checking my pulse. His expression changed instantly, alarm replacing detachment. "Get the stretcher in here, now," he shouted to his partner. Pulse is 140 and thready. Oxygen sats critically low. The room erupted in panic. My father stood frozen, his face ashen, the reality finally penetrating his denial. Aunt Martha backed against the wall, hand over her mouth. Jessica was crying, answering questions while grandmother held her shoulders. As the EMTs worked, attaching monitors, placing an oxygen mask over my face, I caught a glimpse of Dad's expression. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in his eyes. And beneath it, the dawning horror of recognition. He had been catastrophically, dangerously wrong. The oxygen helped slightly, but breathing remained a struggle. The EMTs spoke in urgent tones, cyanotic, tachycardic. They lifted me onto the stretcher. As they raised it, my vision narrowed to a pinpoint, my family's faces receding into darkness as consciousness slipped away. The last thing I remember was the wail of sirens and the sensation of movement as they rushed me out of the house where I had never been believed. Fragments of awareness came and went in the ambulance. The bright ceiling, the pressure of the oxygen mask, urgent voices. BP is dropping, 70/40. Get another line in. Possible P. Call ahead to the ER. Jessica was there, somehow, holding my hand, her face tear-streaked and terrified. Had they let her in? I couldn't remember. But I was grateful for her presence, a familiar anchor in the chaos. "Hang on, Abby. Please hang on." I tried to squeeze her hand, to nod, but my body wouldn't respond. Breathing consumed all my energy. Time lost all meaning. The ambulance ride could have been minutes or hours. Then, new faces as the doors opened. More uniforms, more urgent voices. I was wheeled rapidly through automatic doors, fluorescent lights blurring overhead. 25-year-old female, acute respiratory distress, tachycardic, hypotensive. The EMT rattled off information as they transferred me to a hospital gurney. The movement sent fresh waves of pain. Jessica squeezed my hand tighter. "You have to wait here," someone told her. Her face crumpled, but she nodded, releasing my hand reluctantly. "I'll be right outside, Abby." "I'm not going anywhere." Beyond the doors, activity intensified. A doctor leaned over me, shining a light in my eyes. "Abigail, can you hear me? I'm Dr. Winters. We're going to take care of you." Monitors beeped. Needles pricked my skin. Voices called out numbers. Through it all, the crushing chest pain, the desperate struggle for air, continued. I needed chest CT stat and get ultrasound in here for her leg. Blood oxygen still dropping. Start her on heparin. We need to intubate if her SATs don't improve in the next 2 minutes. The urgency in their voices cut through my fog of pain and fear. This was bad. Really bad. The realization should have terrified me, but a strange, blessed calm settled instead. These people believed me. They saw my distress and responded with appropriate alarm. After a lifetime of having my pain dismissed, the validation was almost as powerful as the oxygen they were pumping into my failing lungs. Someone cut away my shirt, attaching leads to my chest. Cold gel spread over my right leg, followed by the pressure of an ultrasound wand. The doctor watching the screen nodded grimly. DVT confirmed in the right leg. CT is ready for her. More movement, more lights. The CT scanner loomed, a massive, donut-shaped machine that would confirm their suspicions. "Abigail, we need to take some pictures of your lungs," a technician explained. "Try to hold as still as possible." The scan was quick. The aftermath, a blur of increased activity. Words like massive pulmonary embolism and critical condition floated through the air. Back in the ER, new doctors appeared. Specialists. A different mask was placed over my face. A voice told me they needed to put me to sleep for a little while to help me breathe. Darkness claimed me before I could respond, a merciful escape from the pain and fear. I have no memory of the next 12 hours. Jessica later told me I was intubated, a tube down my throat breathing for me. Powerful blood thinners were administered. A special catheter threaded through my veins to directly break up the largest, life-threatening clot. My father arrived at the hospital 20 minutes after the ambulance, having followed in his truck with grandmother and Aunt Martha. He paced the waiting room, refusing to sit, refusing to speak. When the doctor explained my life-threatening and critical condition, he had to brace himself against the wall. Aunt Martha left soon after, claiming stress, but everyone knew she was fleeing her own culpability. Uncle Robert stayed, providing silent support to Jessica, ensuring Dad didn't collapse from shock. Throughout the night, as I lay unconscious in the ICU, my family waited. Jessica refused to leave, curling up in an uncomfortable chair. Grandmother Marshall, despite her age, remained until dawn, quietly knitting, occasionally fixing my father with a look that spoke volumes. The world returned slowly. First, the steady beeping of monitors. Then, the antiseptic smell of the hospital. Finally, the dull ache in my throat, the breathing tube removed. I opened my eyes to a dimly lit room. Jessica sat beside the bed, head drooping in exhausted sleep, her hand still holding mine. Breathing was no longer a desperate struggle, though each inhale caused a dull chest pain. My movements stirred her. Jessica jerked awake, her eyes widening as they met mine. "Abby," she whispered, her voice cracking. "You're awake." I tried to speak, but my throat was raw. Jessica quickly held a cup of water with a straw to my lips. "What happened?" I rasped. She pressed the call button before answering. "You had blood clots in your lungs. Pulmonary embolism, they called it." "It was." She paused, swallowing hard. "It was really bad, Abby. They said if we had waited much longer." She didn't need to finish. We both knew. I had nearly died on my father's kitchen floor while he accused me of faking. A nurse entered, smiling. She checked monitors, made notes, promised the doctor would be in soon. She adjusted my pillows with gentle efficiency, treating my body with a care I was unaccustomed to. Dr. Winters arrived shortly after, a tall woman with kind eyes and quiet confidence. "Good to see you awake, Abigail. You gave us quite a scare." She explained what had happened in terrifying medical terms. A deep vein thrombosis, a blood clot, had formed in my right leg, likely due to prolonged inactivity during my move and job search. Pieces of it had broken off, traveled to my lungs, blocking arteries, preventing proper oxygenation. "Yours was significant," she said, blocking several major vessels. "Your right lung was almost completely compromised." She didn't sugarcoat it. "Your condition was critical when you arrived. Without immediate intervention, the outcome would have been fatal." Fatal. The word hung in the air. I had been dying, and no one in my family, except Jessica, had believed me. "We performed a catheter-directed thrombolysis to break up the largest clots," Dr. Winters continued. "You'll need to remain on blood thinners for at least 6 months. We'll monitor you closely." She reviewed the treatment plan, the medications, the follow-up appointments. Throughout her explanation, she addressed me directly, taking my questions seriously, validating my concerns. The contrast between her approach and my family's dismissal was stark and painful. After she left, Jessica filled in the gaps. "Dad followed us to the hospital," she said. "He looked like a ghost, Abby. When the doctor came out and told us how serious it was, that you might not make it, he just sat down on the floor. Grandmother made him get in a chair. He paced all night, refusing food, speaking only for updates. Aunt Martha left after the first hour," Jessica continued, a hint of anger in her voice. "Said she couldn't handle the stress. Uncle Robert stayed, though. He made sure Dad ate." The news that my father had shown genuine concern was both surprising and confusing. My emotions about him were a tangled mess, relief at his worry competing with anger at his dismissal. "He's here now, actually," Jessica added hesitantly. "In the cafeteria. He's barely left. Do you want to see him?" I wasn't ready. "Not yet." I shook my head. Jessica understood. Throughout the day, nurses came and went, checking vitals, administering medications, asking about my pain levels, and treating them seriously. One nurse spent 10 minutes explaining how the pain medication worked, encouraging me to ask for more if I needed it. "Reporting pain isn't weakness," she said, "but necessary information for your treatment." Many patients, especially women, underreport pain. They've been conditioned to think they should tough it out or that they're not hurting as badly as they think. But pain is important information that helps us treat you properly. Her words struck a chord so deep I had to turn away to hide sudden tears. My entire life, I had been taught that expressing pain was weakness, that my perceptions of my own body were unreliable and dramatic. Here was a medical professional telling me the exact opposite. Later that afternoon, Jessica brought my phone. It was filled with messages from friends. Elaine had texted hourly, increasingly frantic, culminating in a message saying she was driving down the next day. My college roommate, former coworkers, even casual acquaintances had reached out with concern. Their messages formed a stark contrast to my family's years of dismissal. These people, some of whom I had known for only a short time, believed me without question. The door to my room opened. My father stood there, looking smaller, somehow diminished by worry and what might have been guilt. Jessica squeezed my hand and discreetly left. Dad approached cautiously, his eyes taking in the monitors, the 4 lines, the hospital apparatus. "Abigail," he said, his voice rough. "How are you feeling?" "Better," I answered simply. He nodded, standing awkwardly, hands shoved in his pockets. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken accusations and apologies. "The doctor says you're going to be okay," he finally said. "That's good news." I nodded, waiting for more, for some acknowledgement. But he only shifted uncomfortably, commenting on the hospital food, the weather, anything but the elephant in the room. After a few minutes of this strange small talk, he excused himself, promising to return later. As he reached the door, he paused. "I'm glad you're all right," he said. And then he was gone. A week into my hospital stay, Dr. Winters suggested a family meeting. My condition had stabilized. I was being prepared for discharge. She felt it was vital for my family to understand the severity of what had happened and the care I would need. Pulmonary embolism isn't just a one-time emergency, she'd explained. It requires ongoing treatment and lifestyle adjustments. Your family needs to understand that this is serious and that your symptoms should never be dismissed. The unspoken subtext was clear. She knew. Dad arrived first, followed by Jessica and grandmother Marshall. To my surprise, Uncle Robert came as well, along with Aunt Martha, who hadn't visited since that first night. They arranged themselves awkwardly around my room, no one quite meeting my eyes. Dr. Winters began by outlining what had happened in clear, unemotional terms. When Abigail arrived at the emergency room, she said, her gaze sweeping across my family, her oxygen saturation was critically low. Her heart was racing, trying to compensate, putting additional strain on an already compromised system. In medical terms, she was in acute cardiopulmonary distress. She paused, letting that sink in. To be perfectly clear, without immediate medical intervention, Abigail would have died. We're talking about a matter of hours, possibly less. The room was silent, save for a small sound from grandmother, a gasp and a sigh. The early symptoms of pulmonary embolism can be subtle, Dr. Winters continued. Fatigue, shortness of breath, chest pain that worsens with deep breaths. These might be mistaken for other conditions, but they should never be ignored or dismissed. Her emphasis on dismissed was slight, but unmistakable. My father shifted, his discomfort evident. "How are we supposed to know?" he finally asked, defensively. "We're not doctors." Dr. Winters regarded him steadily. "You were not expected to diagnose her condition, Mr. Marshall. But when someone says they cannot breathe, believing them is a good first step. Seeking medical attention promptly can make the difference between life and death." The rebuke, though professional, was clear. My father looked away, his jaw tight. As Dr. Winters concluded, a strange calm settled over me. For years, I had suppressed my feelings, swallowing hurt and anger to keep the peace. But sitting in that hospital bed, with the evidence of their dismissal laid bare in medical terms, something shifted inside me. "I told you I couldn't breathe," I said, my voice quiet but steady. "I told all of you, and you said I was faking." The room went still. This was not the first time, I continued, gaining momentum. "My whole life, every time I was sick or hurt, you told me I was being dramatic. You taught me to ignore my own body, to doubt my own experiences. Tears threatened, but I blinked them back. Do you know what it's like to grow up never being believed? To be in pain and be told it's all in your head? To gasp for air and be accused of putting on a show? Now, Abigail, Aunt Martha began, her tone the same one she'd used to scold me as a child. No one could have known this was serious. You have always been sensitive. I nearly died. I cut her off, my voice rising. The doctor just told you I would have died without treatment, and you are still making excuses. Aunt Martha's face flushed, her mouth opening and closing without sound. She stood abruptly and walked out. Dad sat rigid, his expression a complex mix of anger and shame. We're not mind readers, Abigail, he said, but the usual authority was missing. How were we supposed to know this time was different? You weren't supposed to know, I replied. You were supposed to believe me every time. That's what parents do. They believe their children when they say they're hurting. The words hung in the air, decades of dismissed pain distilled into one simple truth. Dad stood, his movement stiff, and walked to the window, staring out. The silence stretched until Grandmother Marshall spoke up, her voice thin but clear. She's right, Frank. We failed her. I failed her, too. Dad didn't turn around, but his shoulders tensed. When Sarah died, Grandmother continued, referring to my mother, you shut down. You couldn't handle the children's pain on top of your own, so you taught them not to show it. That was wrong. Jessica, quiet until now, reached for my hand. I've been keeping track, she said softly. Every time Abby was sick and no one believed her. Every time she was hurting and got told to tough it out, I wrote it all down. She pulled a small, worn notebook from her purse. The migraine when she was 13 that turned out to be a serious infection. The sprained ankle you made her walk on for 3 days before getting an x-ray. The time she had strep throat and you sent her to school anyway. With each example, the tension grew. Uncle Robert shook his head, genuinely distressed. I had no idea it was this consistent, he said. I noticed sometimes, but I didn't realize how often. It wasn't your responsibility, I told him. But it was Dad's, and he chose not to believe me, over and over again. Dad turned from the window, his face unreadable. I did what I thought was best, he said. I was trying to teach you to be strong. You taught me to doubt myself instead, I replied. And it almost killed me. He had no answer for that. After a long moment, he walked out without another word, the door closing softly. The remaining family members exchanged uncomfortable glances. Grandmother sighed deeply, the sound carrying the weight of regret. He'll come around, she said, though she didn't sound convinced. He just needs time to process. I don't know if I can wait for that, I admitted. I can't keep pretending everything is okay. Not after this. You shouldn't have to, Jessica agreed, surprising me with her firmness. None of this was your fault, Abby. You deserve better. Uncle Robert nodded. I should have said something sooner. All those times I saw how they treated you, I should have spoken up. I'm sorry, Abigail. His apology, the first any family member had offered, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Thank you, I managed. As they left, Jessica promised to return. Grandmother kissed my forehead, whispering an apology of her own. Uncle Robert squeezed my hand, troubled but kind. Alone, I felt emotionally drained but somehow lighter. For the first time, I had spoken my truth without minimizing it or making excuses. The family had fractured, those who could acknowledge the wrong, and those who couldn't face it. I wasn't naive enough to think one confrontation would heal decades of damage. Dad might never fully admit his role. Aunt Martha would likely rewrite history. But something fundamental had shifted. I had found my voice, and I would not be silenced again. That evening, Elaine arrived, bursting into my room with a weekend bag and tears in her eyes. She hugged me carefully, then sat on the edge of the bed, demanding the full story. I told her everything. She listened without interruption, her expression shifting from concern to anger to relief. I always knew your family was messed up, she said when I finished. But this takes it to a whole new level. They could have killed you with their denial. Her righteous anger on my behalf was validating in a way few things had been. Elaine had always believed me, never questioned. What are you going to do now? She asked. You can't go back to living with your dad. It was a question I'd been avoiding. I don't know, I admitted. I can't afford my own place yet. Then you'll come back with me, Elaine declared, as if it were the most obvious solution. My roommate moved out last month. The second bedroom is just sitting there empty. Her offer opened a door I hadn't dared consider, a way back to the independence I'd reluctantly surrendered, a place where I was believed and respected. Are you sure? I asked, hope rising despite myself. Absolutely. Just focus on getting better. We'll figure out the rest. As we talked into the evening, planning my recovery and return to the city, I felt a sense of possibility missing since I'd moved home. This health crisis, terrifying as it had been, had forced a reckoning. It had shown me who truly cared. More importantly, it had reminded me to trust myself. That lesson, painful as it had been to learn, might have saved my life. 2 months after my near-fatal pulmonary embolism, I stood in the kitchen of my new apartment, preparing tea as sunlight streamed through the windows. It was small but bright, a second-floor walk-up in a quiet neighborhood. Jessica had moved in with me, taking the second bedroom after securing a transfer to a nearby hospital. My physical recovery had been slower than anticipated. The first weeks were marked by overwhelming fatigue, persistent chest pain, and the constant vigilance required by my medication regimen. Every twinge in my chest brought fear of another clot. Each follow-up appointment carried the anxiety of potentially bad news. But gradually, my body healed. My lung function improved. My energy returned in small increments, and the fear receded enough to allow normal life to resume. I found a job as a virtual marketing assistant, allowing me to work from home while I recovered. The pay was less, but it covered my rent and utilities, and the flexibility accommodated my frequent medical appointments. My relationship with my family remained complicated. Dad made awkward attempts at reconciliation, sending texts, offering financial help, which I politely declined. We spoke on the phone occasionally, conversations that carefully avoided any mention of the past. He never explicitly apologized for dismissing my symptoms, but he no longer questioned when I mentioned feeling unwell. Aunt Martha and I had no contact at all. The silence between us was a relief. Grandmother Marshall called weekly, our conversations more open and honest than ever. She had started therapy herself, seeking to understand the family patterns. I should have protected you more, she told me once. I saw what was happening and said nothing. That stops now. Uncle Robert had become an unexpected ally, visiting often, genuinely asking about my health. He had confronted Dad, causing a rift between them that had yet to heal. But the most profound change was within myself. I had stopped second-guessing my own experiences. When my body signaled pain or illness, I listened without the filter of doubt that had been instilled in me. I no longer waited until symptoms became unbearable before seeking help. I had learned, at great cost, that my perceptions were valid, my pain real, my needs legitimate. One Tuesday morning, I ran into Dad at the grocery store. An unexpected encounter that left us both speechless in the produce section. He looked older, the lines around his eyes deeper. "Abigail," he said finally. "You look well." "I'm getting there," I replied, the awkwardness palpable. He shifted, examining an apple. "Jessica says your new job is going well." "It is. The company wants to make it permanent next month." He nodded, seeming genuinely pleased. "That's good. Real good." We stood in silence, surrounded by strangers. "I've been thinking," he said, setting the apple down. "About what happened. About all of it. I was wrong." The words, clearly difficult for him, came out in a rush. Not just about the embolism. About a lot of things. The way I raised you after your mother died. I thought I was teaching you to be tough. I didn't realize I was teaching you that your feelings didn't matter. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was more acknowledgement than he'd ever offered. I nodded, accepting his words without rushing to absolve him. "I'm still angry," I told him. "Honestly, I might be for a long time. But I appreciate you saying that." He accepted this with a nod. "Maybe we could have dinner sometime. You and Jessica both, when you're ready." Maybe, I agreed, not committing but not refusing. "I'll think about it." We parted awkwardly, but something had shifted. A door had been cracked open, allowing the possibility of a different kind of relationship, one built on honesty rather than denial. Back at the apartment, I found Jessica, fresh from a night shift, drinking coffee. I told her about Dad. "Do you think he really gets it?" she asked. "Part of it," I replied. "Maybe as much as he's capable of right now." A few weeks later, Jessica experienced a health scare of her own, unusual abdominal pain that had her doubled over. Without hesitation, I drove her to the emergency room, insisting on a thorough examination, despite her protests that it was probably nothing serious. The diagnosis was appendicitis, caught early enough to prevent rupture. As I sat by her hospital bed after her surgery, I realized we had broken the cycle. We had not dismissed her pain or waited until it became critical. We had acted promptly, trusting her body's warning signals. The pattern established by our father would end with us. One evening in early fall, I received a surprising call from Aunt Martha. Her voice was uncharacteristically subdued. "I've been seeing someone," she said after awkward pleasantries. "A therapist?" She suggested I reach out to you. I remained silent. "I said some terrible things that day," she continued. "When you were sick. And before that, too. I was wrong, and I am sorry." The apology was unexpected and oddly disarming. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "Your mother would be ashamed of how we treated you," she said, her voice catching. She never would have allowed it. The mention of my mother, rarely discussed, caught me off guard. "I barely remember her," I admitted. "She was a fierce advocate for her children," Aunt Martha said. "She would have believed you, always." After we hung up, I sat with that new knowledge, that piece of my mother I had never known. Perhaps her advocacy had lived on in me, in my eventual refusal to be dismissed, in my insistence on being heard. As autumn deepened, my life settled into new patterns. Weekly therapy sessions helped me process the medical trauma and family dynamics. Monthly checkups confirmed my continued recovery. Daily walks built my strength and endurance. The fear of another pulmonary embolism never completely disappeared, but it receded enough to allow joy and normal activities to fill my days. One Saturday at a local coffee shop, I overheard a young woman at the next table describing symptoms to her friend, symptoms her family had dismissed as anxiety or exaggeration. The familiarity of her story drew me in. Before I could reconsider, I found myself turning toward her. "I'm sorry to interrupt," I said, but I couldn't help overhearing. "Please get those symptoms checked out, even if no one believes you." I briefly shared my story, watching her expression shift from surprise to recognition. "I thought maybe I was overreacting," she admitted. "Trust yourself," I told her. "You know your body better than anyone else. And if your doctor dismisses you, find another one who will listen." As I walked home afterward, I reflected on how far I had come from that 4th of July when I had gasped for breath on my father's kitchen floor. The journey had been painful, the lessons hard-won. But I had emerged with something precious, the unshakable knowledge that my experiences were real, my perceptions valid, my voice worth hearing. The pulmonary embolism had nearly taken my life. But in surviving it, I had found a kind of freedom I had never known before. The freedom to trust myself completely. No dismissal, no doubt, no criticism could shake that foundation now. And in that trust, I had found not just healing, but strength.